Hello, everybody, and welcome to EduMatch. So thank you so much for joining us. Super happy to be here. And as you can see, there's like a different look and feel tonight. We are going live using OBS. So we're going live to a brand new audience as well on Facebook and on Twitch and hopefully on Periscope if it clicks on. So welcome and thank you all so much for joining us. So tonight's episode is Virtual Learning for Education Leaders. Wanted to give a huge shout out to Brian Romero-Smith for all of his guidance on how to get this set up and working nicely. So without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right into panel introductions because we have a big panel, so I'm excited about that as well. So we're just going to go down the line and we'll have everyone introduce themselves briefly. Yeah, so let's kick things off with Desiree.
Hello, everyone. My name is Desiree Alexander. I am the founder, CEO of Educator Alexander Consulting, and I am the Regional Director of North Louisiana for the Associated Professional Educators of Louisiana. And I am happy to be here. I'm a little sick, so excuse my kind of stuffed up voice, but I am happy to be here.
Sweet, and we are happy to have you as always. So thank you so much for joining us, Desiree. All right, next up we have Kelly.
Hey everybody, I'm Kelly Sain. I'm the Director of Educational Technology for Boulder Valley School District. I have been a classroom teacher from kindergarten all the way through college, and I have also worked with ISTE a couple of times and love to really provide professional development. So glad to be here.
We're so happy to have you, Kelly. So thank you so much for joining us. All right, so next up we have Leslie.
Hi, my name is Leslie Fagan. I am an instructional technology coach in Griffin, Georgia. I have the distinct pleasure of working with our secondary school teachers on effective technology integration. And like Desiree, I'm excited to be here and looking forward to this conversation this evening.
Wonderful. We are excited to have you back, Leslie. So thank you for joining us. All right, great. Next up, we have Samantha.
Hi, everyone. My name's Sam. I'm a former educator, most recently taught in Aurora Public Schools in Colorado. Currently, I am transitioning more full-time into the EdTech space. I'm founder and CEO of an EdTech solution company called Novella, and also currently on the search for a day job in the EdTech world. Happy to be here as well. This is my first one of these, so thanks for inviting me.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, Sam. Great to have you here. So wonderful, wonderful. Next up, we have Sanel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sanelbata. I work for Clark County School District. We are the 5th largest school district in the country. I work in the Career and Technical Education Office, supporting approximately about 47 high schools and 59 middle schools with various technology, STEM, CT programs, and super excited to share and learn from everyone on the panel tonight.
Sweet. We are glad to have you back here with us. So thank you for joining us again, Sanel. Great. And next up, we have Taylor.
Hey there, everybody. Taylor Kendall here. I am out in Denver, also an EduMatch first timer, and apologies for the noise. I'm in a public spot, which maybe I can leverage that into why virtual matters. We can do a lot from a lot of different places. At the university level, designer, educator, system shaker, culture crafter, I like to say, and sort of general troublemaker in the higher ed space. So good to be here.
Sweet. I love that troublemaker part. So welcome, Taylor. Great to have you here. All right. And next up, we have Tomas.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tomas Galguera. I'm the Assistant Dean of the School of Education at Mills College. I also direct the teacher education program there. This is the first time in many ways, not only for one of these meetings, but also going online. We've been working with Noodle to help us create our first online program. And as such, ed leadership is the piece that we've decided to make a go of. So I'm very excited to be here. I hope that I can contribute in any way possible. I always feel a little bit of as an imposter because of coming late and not really knowing as much about it. But anyway, I'll do my best. Thank you.
Oh, we are so glad to have you, and you are doing awesome. So thank you so much for being here. All right, so last and certainly not least, we are going to go to our amazing moderator, Tara. So Tara, if you could please introduce yourself and then just take it away.
Thanks so much, Sarah. It's really nice to see you all. Happy Sunday, and thanks for joining. So I reached out to Sarah with today's topic a couple of weeks ago, and the questions were really inspired by my work with Dr. Tomas Galguera. I'm a learning lead with Noodle Partners. I was previously a language educator actually in Kelly's district here in Boulder Valley. And then I kind of meandered into higher ed, where my kind of passions and curiosities around what virtual learning might be doing for the future of education and what is designing virtual learning going to look like play out. And so full kudos and credit to Dr. Galguera. He helped so much with these questions, and the inspiration for today's chat is really based on the journey in bringing Mills online, and I'm really curious to learn from all of you your thoughts and ideas about what could potentially happen with virtual education, as we all have the meta experience right now of practicing some. So my first question is, when you saw the title for today's chat, just what came to mind? What immediately did you think of?
When I first saw the chat, one of the first things I thought about is our self-paced courses, even for professional development, not even for like earning a degree and things like that. I just thought about self-paced courses that teachers and especially ed leaders can enroll in to actually learn from and help them help with their own professional development, especially because time is short, especially as an education leader. So that's the first thing that popped in my head.
The first thing that I thought of when you think of virtual learning, I think it's learning beyond the four walls of the classroom. I think too often we think learning happens in the classroom and that's the only place it should happen. So I think virtual learning, just like, virtual telecommuting in the workplace or doing things like that, is like learning can happen everywhere. So that's really what my initial thought of virtual learning is.
And I thought about preparing our students for the future. You know, we are going to have many of our students who are not going to be working in a brick and mortar environment. So we have to make sure that we provide opportunities for them to learn, as well as, of course, our educators to experience that. We also have some we have some schools that are in our mountain community and are hard to reach. And so all the more reason for us to use some kind of virtual learning for them to be able to have access to all the resources that perhaps everyone wouldn't have access to in the mountains.
Very similarly to Kelly, actually the very first thing that jumped into my mind, Terry, you'll be happy, is Noodle, followed by 2U, because I've been doing a lot of research and following those two companies this past summer for my own personal reasons. So I thought of both of those companies. But the big word that jumped out to me when I think about virtual learning and educational leadership is access. And so when I think about how classroom demographics are changing and how the demographics of the US population is changing so dramatically, and what that means for what kinds of educational leaders we need and who has access to become an educational leader, I thought that one of the biggest pros and what jumped into mind is virtual learning is key to access to becoming the leader that our students today need.
The one element here I'll add, when I think about access, this isn't what initially popped in my head, but it's something that just now popped into my head, is with the access is sort of this idea of amplification, and it's a double-edged sword, I think. The voices that can and will be amplified given the possibilities with virtual. So with the leadership side of education, I think it's those that know they have things that we're saying and those that are providing that access, we're equally amplifying the positivity and the leadership in sort of combat with the voices that are being amplified, don't necessarily want to be heard. So I'm very curious about this idea of how virtual is amplifying different voices and different views.
Like Desiree said, when you think about, well, what I first thought about was the self-paced courses, like Desiree said, but then I also think about the informal learning opportunities that happen via social media and such. As an educator, I've grown tremendously using those informal learning opportunities. And I think that a lot of our educational leaders are, well, I don't think they're starting to take advantage of it, but more and more getting on board, especially here in my district, with realizing the power of being a connected educator and the things that you can learn from those. And I forget who said it, beyond the walls of your classroom. So to me, that's what I first thought about, those formal and informal learning opportunities that we can take advantage of.
As Tara mentioned, this is Tomas. I've been thinking about it quite a bit because it's, in essence, when she asked me about this meeting, what I've been struggling with, or at least devoting quite a bit of time with in my inroads into online education work, has to do with issues of equity and access. Teaching, because it's so complex, it always relies or requires us to make a bunch of assumptions. You know, we assume that if we get them into small groups, they're going to be more engaged than if we just simply lecture. We assumed that if we give them a sort of something that has that humor at some point might actually lighten up things. And all these are assumptions because things are so complex. And in creating this course, this Ed Leadership course, I've realized that it isn't just simply writing up the script for a movie, to make a bad analogy, but in that it's not only making the script, but also directing the movie, shooting it, editing it all, and then creating an audience for the movie, because I have to imagine all these things. So it's assumption upon assumption. And I may be very curious about how it is that my own biases and biases other people bring into this kind of instruction play out. And as Taylor was saying, what gets amplified, what gets left out, what are the kinds of needs that students bring in that we can't quite catch because there's a screen and there's time and there's distance, and I don't know, those are just my thoughts and concerns.
Something else that I think is kind of important, this is Kelly, is that it can be synchronous and asynchronous. And I don't know how many times, just even to think about the people in this room right now, just to try and get us all together and coordinate our schedules is a little bit rough. So although Sarah, you did it, and Tara, you did it, it's really important though for us to really understand that I can still have these conversations, and it could be that I'm meeting with experts, but it doesn't have to be all at the same time. And then I'm learning from everybody beyond the four walls of my classroom, but I could do it in this format, which is at the same time, but also virtually through discussion forums, etc. And that's pretty powerful.
You are listening to the Edgy Match podcast.
Hi everybody, my name is Dr. Samantha Fesich and I'm the author of Edgy Magic. Edgy Magic, a guide for pre-service teachers, is geared towards teachers in training to become educators of excellence during their college career. Now, all the letters in Edgy Magic stand for something. E, educate and engage. D, digital presence. U, unite your PLN. M, megapixels. A, always be. G, get out. I, inconceivable, and co-op gone virtual. All these things come together to help create Edgy Magic. I can't wait to hear your response. Please share how you're learning and what great things you're doing in your classroom with hashtag Edgy Magic on your social media. I look forward to hearing from you.
You are listening to the Edgy Match podcast.
Thank you, everyone. Just to recap briefly, we've thought about self-paced courses, how virtual means we're going beyond the four walls. What does it mean to potentially prepare students and teachers in more rural communities? And can we reach potentially educational leaders who otherwise wouldn't have access through virtual opportunities? And we've already discussed several times the question of access and what does that mean, and amplification of voices. So to build off those ideas and those threads, if you would next share a little bit more about your background or maybe your journey as an educator, and like as Tomas actually just role modeled, what do you think are the possibilities of educating leaders online? Can we be inclusive truly to all potential ed leader learners? What are the affordances, potential barriers? So share a little bit more about your journey as an educator, and then what are some of the questions you have, affordances, barriers about virtual learning?
My journey through education started very early, and I was sort of thrust into it in an interesting way where I certainly didn't think that was the path I was going to be on. I worked for a grant through the Library of Congress, which was very rewarding, but also made me really rethink what sort of education and what leadership looks like from a policy level. That's not something I thought I would get introduced to so early. But it was a grant that was sort of PED and K-12 education related, but I was slowly getting exposed to what leadership and education looked like on a bigger, broader national scale. So I think that's something we often need to find the right balance of not losing track of what a sort of global and democratic society can look like from a policy level, like that level of leadership, and understanding that those laws and policy that get put into place do have ramifications that trickle down all the way to that rural community. But balancing that with the, I guess, sort of bravery to just stand up and be a leader within our own educational context, whatever that would look like, and perhaps at times in face of existing policy. So that's something I always grapple with, what that balance is between understanding the value of democracy and the rules and regulations that are put into place for good reason that offer students is the paths towards a good education, but they're also standing up and the troublemaking and the system shaking that I like to come back to, and when that makes sense. It's a balance. It's a dance that I'm going to do for the rest of my life, I think, and it's always I'm learning every day about how to get that right.
With the first question of like kind of the journey through education, I started as a middle school English teacher, 6th grade and 8th grade, and then moved to the middle school library and high school library, and then moved into the district level. And that was my first, not my first, but my first official brush with educational leadership, becoming an instructional technology supervisor for a large school district. And I started to learn more and more about what makes an educational leader tick, what makes a successful leader, those things. So, from my journey, I started training educational leaders for the EPN, and I've been part of the program where we train them to what makes an educational leader, what they be thinking of, what should they be doing today, and also helping them pass the SLLA exam. So that was very, very rewarding for me, and really got me to see who wants to become an educational leader, the good and bad reasons that they think they want to be an educational leadership, and how to kind of mold that person into an education that you want and that you want for your, for your kids or the kids that you love. And it was just very eye-opening. And I loved it. Some of the things that, we would discuss is just the practicality of it. Because anybody, I feel like, can talk about the theory behind educational leadership. You can read a book and come up with that, but what are the practical things that they actually need to know? And I think virtual learning really helps them with that. And the program that I worked with was all virtual learning. Everything happened online. Our resources were online. We had classes through Adobe Connect online. So I know the power of virtual learning in educational leadership.
Anyone have a question for Desiree? I feel like I have a few, but wanted to open the floor to see if we want to explore more some of what she worked on. I know I'm curious for like some examples for, sounds like you had some powerful moments or experiences, and maybe like what one of them was.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I would love to jump off of what Desiree said. So Tara, if you want to go with one of your questions.
Sam, go for it.
Okay. I really like, Desiree, what you brought up. Well, I guess I'll start with a little bit about my background. My role in the education space up to this point right now has always been that of a teacher. I taught for 4 years, starting in Detroit Public Schools, Cleveland Public Schools, and most recently Aurora Public Schools. I've always taught in schools that were 80% or more students of color. And for the most part, I've always worked under educational leaders who were white men. And so when I think about practicality, virtual learning, and educational leadership, one of the things I think is an affordance of virtual learning is, again, this access piece. And because virtual learning can be so personalized and people can get on it at their own time in relation to other things they have going on, I think it does create a path to educational leadership that is more accessible. So I think it's more accessible for women, for mothers, for people of color, for women of color, and so that's huge. Again, I mentioned it before, our classroom demographics are changing. The demographics of our educational leadership need to be changing as well. Still about 80% of school principals are not people of color, they're white. And so when I think about some of the barriers, I think one of the practical pieces of being an educational leader is really understanding the community that you will be serving, being present in the community in which you will be serving. That means understanding the overriding concerns of families, what the community values, what the community is experiencing as a challenge. And so I think that an affordance of virtual learning is that, right, it expands our network. Anyone can get on at any time, and so it allows our network to be wider, and perhaps we can connect more with the community, though is it in an authentic way? And so when I think about the demographics of our current educational leaders, again, predominantly white people, through virtual learning, are they actually able to understand the intricacies and complexities of their communities? And so that's one question I have, because that's a very practical part of the job, being present in schools, being present in the community. And if you're not a person of color and you're trying to enter into one of our public school communities, are you able to really understand the community just through virtual learning?
So Sam, I'm going to add on to what you were saying. I like the idea that what you're discussing really is that choice and voice, you know, really giving everyone a chance to speak. And I think that's the power of virtual learning. That we sometimes in a big room, if we're all doing something face to face, that may not be the easiest place for some people to stand up and have an opinion or express their thoughts. And I think when we are doing things virtually, for those, it gets out all at the different learning styles. For the individuals who need to process, think it through, and decide on how they're going to respond, that is an awesome opportunity to increase that voice by being able to do that. So to me, virtual really needs to be more about blended. So I have the opportunity to still meet some people face to face, but I also have the opportunity to continue that learning afterwards. I don't know about all of you, but tonight at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's what I should have said, and I'll wish that I could, you know, add that into this group, because I'll always process and learn and reflect and grow. So if we can make sure that we're combining the virtual with the blended, so that the conversation will continue the next time we're able to meet each other as educational leaders, whether it's virtually or face-to-face, I have extended that conversation so that perhaps we can go deeper. And that's really what's one of, to me, the power of it, and giving everyone that opportunity, because they might not want to speak out loud, but they might want to blog about it, or they might want to be a part of a virtual session, and it's easier for them. So at least it gets at that equity and different learning styles.
So my education background is not traditional, meaning I grew up, but my professional career started in the corporate world. So I was a consultant in business and IT, did a lot of training for adults, and I have to admit, adults are harder to train than students. And adults will fight change tooth and nail. They will complain, they will verbalize all their frustrations in the first 5 minutes of you saying, hey, we're going to do something new today. But students, and I think what's interesting with virtual learning, I think that's where students are, right? Students are using technology. They have literally those touchscreen devices built into them as like rattles now when they're babies. And I think really the power that virtual learning has, and I said it before, is that you know it does take that learning beyond the four walls, from the old school tradition of being in a classroom, and that's where you read a book, that's where you did your math problems. Yeah, we assigned homework and stuff, but virtual learning, I think, really takes those conversations that you may have in a classroom to home, to you know, we have Taylor from you can join us from our coffee shop. It really gives us that flexibility that geographic location isn't as important, and it also really, with technology, provides students, educators, that global perspective. You know, with technology, we constantly live in a global society. So, and especially this generation of millennials and the next generation, they're so focused on global social issues, different things like that, that I think, and the reason why is because of virtual learning, how it's really kind of opened the doors. So if you think about it, you know, as all of us probably grew up, you know, we probably remember, or at least I remember going to the library, opening up a card catalog, pulling out the card, Dewey Decimal System, all that stuff. Now it's like, you know, my daughter, within 5 seconds, she can find an answer to something. She just goes to google.com. So it's really kind of, I would think it's opened the doors and provided a lot of access and equity, not only to students, to educators, but like I think Samantha mentioned, you know, the point where there's still a lot of edu leaders that are still, and I'll say it, they're old school, right? So they don't understand virtual learning, they don't understand the power of it. To give you a quick example, I do a lot of professional development for our teachers. You know, we have about 18,000 teachers in Clark County School District. And one of the things 2 years ago that I presented to other PD presenters was that I surveyed the people that came to my training, and I asked them, what's the best way for you to get PD? Is a 3-hour class after school, weekends, Saturday workshops the best way? Is a 1 hour chunk better? Is a virtual chunk better? And as you can expect, hands down, they were more, hey, let's do the 1 hour webinars. Let's do the 1 hour content where I could do it from home. I could do it from my classroom. I could do it driving somewhere, different things like that. And what's interesting is the other professional development people in the room were completely surprised, and they were 100% against me. They're like, I'm still going to do the 3 hour after school training classes because I get, 100 people to show up. And I was like, you could get 100 people to show up. That doesn't mean 100 people are learning something. And I really think that's how we have to look at virtual learning. It's just a different way. We call it virtual, but it could be called something else in a month or two. But it's really where I think all of us really should be going, what different ways are we learning? Because every year we got different students. Every year we have different teachers, different, education leaders. So, and I'm going to stop talking because, as you can tell, I'm not really passionate about this, but I'll let someone else chime in.
Would someone like to build off that?
Actually, let me contrast a little bit, because if anything, maybe I'm the skeptical in the group. As I told Tara all along, I don't know. I'll, of course, I'll do this, and by default, because in some ways in the School of Ed, perhaps I'm the least phobic to technology. But in many ways, I have some questions, and I continue to have questions specifically about issues or concerns related to relational aspects of teaching and the job that we do, especially in terms of ed leadership, and also pedagogical ones. I'm not exactly sure how it is that I translate the pedagogy that I've gotten, I think, good enough at working at Mills. And also there's sort of there's a Mills-ish way of doing things. We typically don't do PowerPoints. And so there's a culture about people who go to Mills that they know what to expect. And I'm wondering whether there's sort of an emergence of expectations like that for people who complete online courses. And to what extent that in itself is creating its own set of constraints and affordances that have a bias to a certain group. I imagine that probably is biased to a younger group of students, as several of you have pointed out. But I'm also curious about aspects of culture and language. And in some ways, I tend to be a little bit obsessive about language, because as you might have detected, yes, I do have an accent. English is my second language. I was a bilingual student, student and teacher for several years here in Oakland. And in that sense, sort of how one develops language and discourse associated with academic domains is something that I'm always thinking about. And I'm really curious about discourse patterns on online media. Yes, it is true that there's a lot more options to when and how to participate, but I still think there's a certain bias to certain fluency with technology and digital realms, and it tends to be also text heavy. I mean, there's different genres if you want to think about it though in those terms, in terms of a text versus an email, a blog, or any other forms. But I'm based on what I know from my own research and my own experience, that tends to privilege some groups over others. So those are the questions that emerge for me in this work.
Thank you, Tomas.
You are listening to the Edgy Match podcast.
The Teacher's Journey takes a deeper look at how we grow, learn, and succeed in the world of education. Throughout the book, you'll follow the journey of 7 incredible educators that share their trials and triumphs as they walk along their own journey. The Teacher's Journey will challenge you to reflect on who you are and why you are in education, while providing personal examples and practical tools to use right now. Pairing with the book is the Teacher's Journey podcast. There you can hear great educators as they reflect upon their journey and share the lessons they have learned along the way. You can find more information about the book, the podcast, and lots more by visiting costellocorner.com, where you can also sign up for exclusive access to information, graphics, and educational training resources.
You are listening to the Edgy Match podcast.
To add to that, has anyone thought about, Kelly was mentioning the virtual and then the blended and these different ways that we participate in virtual learnings, and thought about how the design of those experiences could privilege certain future ed leaders over others?
I've gotten like, I think two or three of my masters online only. And I think it is an option. You know, I think we get into not a good area anytime we say that one thing is mandatory over the other. I think it depends on the type of student that, you know, you are and what you want to get involved in. Like, I know in my life right now, if you said I had to meet in person with professors and I would be out. Like, there's no way in the world I would have time to do that. And I'm not interested in doing that. I'd rather form that relationship with my professor through email or on the phone or like, but that's what I want to do. So I think as long as those options are there to do the virtual degrees and things like that, I think it gives people an option. It gives people a way that if I can't, like I said, I wouldn't have all the degrees I have right now if I had to go sit in the classroom. There's no way in the world. So, but it gave me an option. And being an introvert, it was better for me because I don't want to sit and discuss every single aspect of every single thought that everybody has. So it gave me that option to do so. So I think that's where it really becomes a benefit because it's giving people other options.
I love what you're saying, Desiree. I also think what's really cool is the technology has changed. When you think about the first couple of online courses that you took, it was literally online. Now we have an opportunity, you know, there's this window of Brady Bunch right now, all talking, and we are all sharing that information. And then we could split people up into a Zoom room and have a chat room, and those people could coordinate and have the conversations themselves. They could work, on a collaborative doc. They could decide to work afterwards and put it into a discussion. I mean, there are ways to put every pedagogy that you do in a classroom in an online format. You just have to be intentional about it. And that is what has changed with virtual. And I think it's a pretty powerful way to be able to simulate similar to what we have in the classroom. So it would allow for all of those different kinds of learning modalities. I just think you have to be intentional as an instructor and as an educational leader. And that's the part that I'm not sure we are great at being intentional.
I feel like it's messy maybe a little bit right now. Like, as we're translating the pedagogies that work so well face-to-face that we care about, and as Tomas was describing, you can truly become an expert in and do really well and bring a group together to learn and reflect more deeply. And I think I sometimes too have the same like questions. How do we know in the translation of those pedagogies or of those beliefs and structures that we're not privileging or dividing ourselves in ways online that aren't for the benefit of learning? What's the metacognition we need to have and be aware to really think about that? And I don't know, but I think Taylor wanted to say something.
Yeah, Desiree and Kelly, and these are all spot on. And to me, it's the options, the affordability. I'm thinking about this grad class I'm teaching right now and what it looks like just compared. I went through a fully online grad program as well. And the difference just in 6-8 years is just stark, and it's amazing what I'm now able to do with a group of students. So the affordances and the options, yes, that's like absolutely embracing the fact that we do now have this crazy amount of flexibility in the way we develop our own pedagogies. I said there was this discussion of emerging or emergent. I think we have definitely hit the point of like emergent pedagogies, like things are now here that we're not. And for me, it's not discounting the fact that these inevitabilities of where technology is, we can't discount the fact that this is only going to move faster. These things are only going to evolve to be more complex. And so it's the balance of, yes, there's new affordances, and things are going to get kind of weird and crazy, but don't undermine how powerful these changes are. And students are just coming in with very different expectations. And I often think, even someone who I feel like I'm fairly I've done a lot to understand what technology represents these days, and even I feel like overwhelmed by how many options there are. So I think we all can just do as much as the leaders of educators and of students to, recognize the inevitability of what's here and what's coming. Don't discount what technology represents, because it's here, it's to stay, and it is both going to be the sort of bringer of the panacea or our demise, depending on what we want to do as educators. Like we have the control to shape this in a positive way. So just, there is an inevitability to it that I think often we get scared by and just sort of discount what it is. But we really have to accept how powerful it is, and we're in a different era, just very different.
I think if I could add to what Taylor's saying is, I think one of the things that, and once again, I've only been in education 8 years, so my perspective is coming from a lot of my years in the corporate world. But I think too often what I've found in education is that when something new comes out, a lot of educators, leaders, teachers, everyone, they really think it's supposed to replace something. And really, it's not replacing anything that has worked in the past. What it is, it's another tool, right? It's another skill. It's another way to deliver content, information, work with students, different things like that. We're not asking you to scrap what you're doing in a classroom and go all virtual or go. And I think someone made the comment, it's got to be a blended. It's got to be a mix. And for each person, it's going to be different. And I think too often we try to, or at least in education, I've seen different initiatives, things get pushed down, and people think that it's getting jammed down their throat, that, hey, I have to do it this way, and that's the only way to do it. But half the time they never ask, hey, so what if I do it this way? Or what if I think of a hybrid way of doing this, or different things like that? And one thing and I'll make sure and tweet this out is that, I always try to make sure when I worked with students when I was in the classroom is that, my job isn't so that you can leave the classroom, leave high school and be able to pass the test. My job is to ensure that you can learn something, you can unlearn it, and you can relearn something different, so that you can be successful no matter what you're doing. Because just like Taylor was saying, things are changing so rapidly, and if we're not, as edu leaders, be able to learn something, unlearn it, and then relearn something and understand the value or the benefit or that foundation of learning or foundation of knowledge, pedagogy, whatever you want to call it, that we've learned and build from it, then how are we trying to translate that to students and prepare them so that they can be successful? So, but yeah, great points by everyone. I love this conversation.
Thank you. Me too.
You are listening to the Edgy Match podcast.
If you wanna be somebody, if you wanna go somewhere, you better wake up and pay attention. It's either now or never to make your dreams come true. You better wake up and pay attention. Hey everybody, it's Dean from Orlando, Florida, coming to you on Monday, April 2nd, 2018. And I am very excited because today is the official release date of my first solo book titled The Why in You. Journey to the Why in You. I'm very excited that this is available on Amazon in Kindle versions and in paperback. There's your back cover right there. I am so excited because when I think about my journey as an educator, it didn't start yesterday. It started even from an early age. And so this book contains anecdotes, stories about the why in me. And so as you read it, as you pick it up, and I encourage you to do so, I challenge you to consider the why in you, the obstacles, right? That were not always positive. They were not always easy. The journey's never easy, but it is worth it. And there is something positive in every negative if you can just see it. I really do believe that. There is something positive in every obstacle that if you could just see it, it will help you to continue going on that journey as an educator, as an administrator, as a teacher. And so we have a job to do. And so that journey is so important to be embraced. And thank you in advance for checking it out on Amazon. Again, it's The Why in You. You can even type my name in on Amazon. It should pop it right up. You can also go to deanganey.com and find it there. You can click directly on the link and it'll take you to Amazon. Again, thanks in advance for checking it out, and have a great day, as well as identify the why in you.
You are listening to the Edgy Match podcast.
Taking our minds and gearing a little bit back towards preparing future ed leaders and what that means. And thinking about, we probably all bring some fundamental assumptions or beliefs or principles, and like, what does it mean to prepare future ed leaders in our different communities and the different places where we work and the different students who we serve. We've also touched a little bit about this translation and online, and we've talked about emergent pedagogies and the question of, well, how do face-to-face pedagogies translate? So maybe we can reflect out loud a little bit about, you know, what would you advocate for in preparing future ed leaders, and how would you advocate for what that should look like online? What would you advocate for in preparing future ed leaders, and what would you advocate for how that looks like? Maybe an example or something you've experienced.
I think for the future of ed leaders, as far as being trained online, I think it's a great idea. I came to education the non-traditional route, and I was in graduate school. I don't have a degree in education. I have a degree in political science, and I've had other careers. But I did my doctoral program online. Well, actually, it was a hybrid program. And at the same time I was doing that, I was working on my ed leadership certification. In the EDD program, there wasn't really a whole lot of practical theory or whatever. If that's I'm going to call it practical stuff. There wasn't a lot of hands-on. It was a lot of pie in the sky theory. But at the same time that I was doing that, on one end of the state, I was doing another hybrid program where I had to do a lot of hands-on stuff. In my budgeting class, I had to develop a real budget, and I had to interview people in the school system. I went to a job fair for my human resources management class. So I think if we're talking about training ed leaders, we can train them in the theoretical way, but at the same time, there are things that they have to know in order to be an effective leader, and you can't do that without actually having your feet on the ground. So I think that if we're talking about training them in the future, how are we going to merge that, okay, you need to know this, but you have to be able to do this. So how do we marry those two pieces together? I think that training them online is a fantastic thing because it was able to save me a lot of time. But had I not had the hands-on portion, I think I'd be lost right now.
Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for letting us know that time is escaping us. Please feel free to answer that previous question or just take a moment, pause, and share at least one takeaway, or as Kelly said, that one thing you think might wake you up at 2 a.m. you wish you had said or that you might be thinking about.
I just want to say amen, Leslie, and that's my takeaway.
It's always this balance. And I think right now, maybe coming back to the last question, if I can like instill anything or something that really now motivates me and I know will wake me up tonight and will do so again probably in the future, is this idea of empowering educational leaders to be both open and inviting of technology and equally critical of it. So things like the Critical Digital Pedagogy Lab and what that represents out at Mary Washington. Check out that group if you haven't. Work by Jesse Stommel and Sean Michael Morris. This idea of critical digital pedagogy is huge, and Tara knows that I've kind of been on this kick recently, but it's that balance of empowering folks to be as critical as they should be when it doesn't serve us and when it ostracizes certain populations and it's not equitable, to be very critical of it when it matters at those points, but also not being critical for the sake of being critical and being inviting of it when it affords us opportunities, which it can do. So it does both those things, and leaders have to, make hard decisions on when you should take either of those stances. And thank you for this group. This was really fun, and yeah, an hour is never enough for conversations like this.
I guess my takeaway is just being able to take a risk and really look at how we are making sure that we're providing opportunities for ourselves as leaders, as well as new leaders coming into the profession, as well as our students. We know that this is changing, and if any one piece is going to be relevant, I think, you said that we have to be adaptable and understand how to handle change. And this is one of them. So if we are not open to trying something new, then we can't possibly see the potentials. And as Taylor just said, there might be issues and it might not all be perfect and sweet when it comes through, but yet we've at least tried it. So to experience it as a learner, I think, Leslie, you were perfect. We have to experience it as a learner before we can understand how to implement it as a educational leader. I sit and think about this right now. Just think of the opportunity that Sam was talking about for equity for all. If your back to school night was done something like this with all of your different teachers, and for those parents who couldn't go to the back to school night, you just sent this out in an email afterwards, just think how powerful that would be to bring in all of your community and have all of their voices. So we've got to, it's not an option anymore. It has to be something that we provide for our leaders.
This has been such an awesome conversation. So really have to thank you, Tara, for organizing this, putting this together. Thank you, Tomas, because I know that both of you collaborated. And thank you to our amazing panelists. Oh my goodness, this was just awesome. So thank you so much for the great conversation.
You are listening to the Edgy Match podcast.
Hello, my name is Mandy Freilich, and my book, The Fire Within, is currently available on Amazon. The Fire Within is a book of stories by educators who have gone through personal and professional adversities and who have come through stronger on the other side. They use their superpowers that they gained with their students in order to be better educators. If this sounds like stories of superheroes, you are absolutely right. There's also a chapter on trauma and how it affects the brain, and a chapter covering post-traumatic growth and secondary traumatic stress and how it affects educators in their job. So if you are interested in The Fire Within, you can find it right now on Amazon by searching The Fire Within: Lessons from Defeat That Have Ignited a Passion for Learning. Thank you.
You are listening to the Edgy Match podcast.
Thank you all so much for an amazing conversation. So just to let y'all know, Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern, then we are going to be chatting with Kevin, who is the president of K-12 Inc. So check that out, podcast.edumatch.org. And then after that, we're taking a little bit of a hiatus for the beginning of the school year, for Labor Day, for my birthday, turn up. And we will be back on September 16th, where we'll be talking with Matthew Farber about game-based learning. So thank you all so much, and everyone have a fantastic evening.
It's Edge Match. Edge Match. It's Edge Match. You're an Edge Match.